Good morning. Welcome to our Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading's in-person and virtual Sunday worship service. My name is Nart, Charlene Reynolds Santo. Charlene pulled up sick, and we've had to do a little bit of the 15 sliding puzzle piece. Allison's up there, I'm down here, people are everywhere. It'll work out. My name is, however, Al Murray. I am a member of the worship arts team and the tech team. My pronouns are he and him. Today, we gather in an understanding and welcoming environment where we nurture and explore individual spirituality, work to build a committed and loving community, and to help heal our fragile community and world. We are an intentionally inclusive congregation, and thanks to the internet, we serve many communities north of Boston and far, far beyond. We welcome you, no matter your age, gender identity, sexual orientation, differing abilities, religious background, spiritual beliefs, or political perspective. If this is your first time with us, I would like to extend a special welcome to you. If you haven't already, please look at our webpage for more information about UUCR. And there you can find details about our church community, sign up for the weekly newsletter, find the contact information for Melissa Martin, our member service coordinator, who can answer any of your questions. If you are watching this service during its initial broadcast at 10 o'clock on April 3rd, please join us after the service for small group conversations via Zoom. This is a great way to keep connected and to check in with others throughout our church community. The link to the Zoom meeting can be found in the weekly UUCR newsletter, and there will be a special meeting of the congregation, which will be also live on the Zoom meeting. Our Share the Plate tradition started over 2 years ago as a spiritual practice of giving half of each Sunday's collection to nonprofit organizations that share our UU values. We do this not because we have more than we need, but because there is so much need, and this is a simple yet powerful way for each of us to live out our mission commitment to heal the world by learning about and supporting the good works of charitable organizations and becoming more involved in our community. In honor of Earth Day, our Green Sanctuary team has selected the Massachusetts Climate Action Network, MCAN, as our Share the Plate recipient for the month of April. MCAN is a statewide network of city and town-based organizations working to address climate change. It provides support to local chapters so they can implement change at the municipal level. MCAN also advocates at the state and regional level to decrease climate change causing pollution and improve statewide energy and climate policies and programs. MCAN is currently working to stop the construction of a new 60-megawatt gas and oil power plant in Peabody that will emit 51,000 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. MCAN instead proposes the construction of a plant using clean, renewable, and sustainable alternatives. This organization is also advocating for net zero construction standards so that new buildings and houses will produce as much renewable energy as they consume. The official time to donate is later in the service during our offertory music. But I won't tell. If anyone online wants to go and do it now, that's okay. On behalf of all the staff and volunteers involved in today's worship, I want to thank you for being here with us this morning. We believe that you all belong here. Maybe just for the next hour, although we hope your journey with us will be longer. You belong here, and we give thanks that you are joining us here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Weiner, your Transitional Ministry Associate. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Our opening words this morning come from the writings of Václav Havel. He wrote, "I've always been deeply affected by the theater of the absurd because I believe it shows the world as it is, in a state of crisis. It shows man having lost his fundamental metaphysical certainty, his relationship to the spiritual, the sensation of meaning. In other words, having lost the ground under his feet. A man whose world is collapsing, who shares that he has irrevocably lost something but is unable to admit this to himself and therefore hides from it. Complete skepticism is an understandable consequence of discovering that one's enthusiasms are based on illusion. This skepticism leads to a dehumanization of history. But history is not something that takes place elsewhere. It takes place here. We all contribute to making it. If bringing back some human dimension to the world depends on anything, it depends on how we acquit ourselves in the here and now." Katie will light our chalice.
Good morning. I'm Katie McQuage-Lucas, your ministerial intern, and my pronouns are she and hers. Please join me in lighting our chalice together. The words are in the order of service. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the holiness we seek. And now our children's affirmation explaining what it means to be UU. We are Unitarian Universalists, the Church of the open mind, the loving heart, and the helping hands.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see each and every one of you today in the pews. We're going to sing. Our opening hymn today is "Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire," number 34 in the gray hymnal. Please rise and body your spirit.
So I have a story for you this morning, and the front row is a little bit empty if anybody would like to come forward for the story, but you don't have to, but you can. Excellent, excellent. And so some of you probably know this story already. Once upon a time, there was an emperor of a great kingdom who absolutely loved clothes. And nothing made them happier than getting all dressed up. And so instead of paying attention to being a good ruler, or even doing other fun things like listening to music, all they did was put on fancy outfits, each one fancier than the one before. And all they did was look in a mirror all day or wander around town showing off their beautiful fabrics. And so one day, some strangers came to town, and they told the emperor that they had the best cloth. It was fabulous, a magical cloth. And only the absolute smartest people who were brilliant and wise and good at their jobs would be able to see this very, very special cloth. And the ruler thought, well, I'd be very beautiful in that clothing, and I'd be able to know who's giving me good advice. I'd know who's good at their job. This is the best idea. And so the ruler said, yes, absolutely, make me this special, fantastic cloth. And the weavers said, okay. And so they went, and they set up looms, and they took a bunch of money and a bunch of thread, and then they put all the money and the thread in their bags, and they started pretending to weave cloth. And one day, the emperor said, I think somebody should go check on them and make sure they're working hard. And he sent his very wisest advisors so that they could see the cloth and tell him how it was going. And the advisors went, and they looked, and they didn't see anything, and they thought, am I not smart? Am I not good at my job? I can't tell anyone that. And so they nodded, and they said, yes, this is the most beautiful fabric I've ever seen. It's the best fabric. And they went back, and that's what they told the emperor. And so everyone in the capital city knew that this cloth was being made. Word got around, and everybody knew that only the best people could see it. And so when it came time for the emperor to put on his fancy new clothes and go through town, everybody wanted to see. And so the emperor went to the weavers who'd taken the cloth, snipped it up, and pretended to sew it. And they said, okay, it's time to put it on. And the emperor looked, and he thought, am I not smart enough? Am I not good at being emperor? And he said, oh, it's the most beautiful, beautiful outfit I have ever seen. And so the people who came and made the clothes took off what the emperor was wearing, helped him take it off, and then pulled out this invisible clothing and said, look at it, it's so light. It's light and it's beautiful. And the emperor, they put it on, and he looked at himself in the mirror, and he said, yes, I look fantastic. And so the emperor then decided it was time to walk around town and show off his outfit like he always did. And so everybody knew that this was special, and that if they couldn't see it, maybe it meant they weren't good enough. Only the best people could see it. And so everybody looked at each other and then nodded and said, oh wow, the emperor looks wonderful in this fabulous new outfit. But then one of the kids looked, and what do you think he said? He said, I don't think the emperor's wearing any clothes. And a couple of people giggled because it was a very funny thing to say. And then they all looked and they thought, well, if that person's giggling, maybe I'm not the only one who can't see it. And then they giggled a little bit more. And a couple of other people started to agree and say, yeah, I don't see any clothes either. And everybody got a little bit braver when they heard more and more people saying that. And they were able to realize that they were not alone. And there were still people who wouldn't admit that they had been fooled and wouldn't admit that they'd made a mistake, especially the emperor, who would have been very embarrassed. But most people were able to laugh at themselves just a little bit, admit that it was okay to not know everything, that it's okay to ask questions. And maybe it's especially okay to ask questions if what you're seeing doesn't quite match what everyone else is saying. So thank you, and you can go back to your seats now, and there will not be RE today.
As we do each Sunday, we pause for a moment to kindle the flame that connects those of us who call this congregation home. To those who we call neighbor and friend, the flame extends outward into our communities and throughout the region of people we touch in our daily lives and our thoughts. May the flame burn brighter through the spark that kindles this flame and through us, as it embodies our commitment to bring justice, love, and healing to our hurting world.
Beloved friends, gathered here in actual and virtual community, we gather in gratitude for this congregation's commitment to value-based sexuality education as we host the Metro West Boston Our Whole Lives Facilitator Training on our campus this weekend. We send our love and our support for Allie Cook, who left for her through-hike attempt of the Appalachian Trail. Please send her your thoughts and your support and your love. We send our love and healing prayers to those members of the UUCR community who have struggled with and continue to struggle with COVID-19 illness. We share our care and support for all those who call this congregation home and who continue to strive for a return to good health. And we look to the wider world, unsettled and struggling as well. I light a candle this morning for families who have endured more than a month of terror. For those who travel in cars, by foot, on buses, bicycles, to get their children or their grandparents to safety. May saving grace, who some call God, sustain them. I light a candle for a member of the Ukrainian parliament learning how to shoot a Russian-made rifle so that she might defend her homeland. For the grandmother making Molotov cocktails to combat those who would take her home. For the family living in a dark basement with little food for weeks. May the goddess of love and light hold them close. And I light a candle for the stand-up comic who has inspired his nation and the world. For the television host who had the courage to declare publicly the truth in front of cameras in Russia that broadcast lies. May the flame of truth that our chalice embodies continue to burn strong in them. I light a candle for the thousands of Russians who have taken to the streets to protest this war, knowing that they will risk beatings and imprisonment. And I light a candle for the thousands of Ukrainians who have not, will not surrender, for the babies born in bomb shelters, for the nameless souls who embody bravery with every ounce of their being. And we light one more candle for all the acts of courage and resistance that we learn of every day, every hour, and for all those unknown to us, but being carried out for love of country, for love of freedom. Let us continue to light candles for them all, holding their blessed spirits in our hearts as we gather in safety and warmth in this sanctuary built and sustained by love. Let us take a moment now in silence and prayer to share our strength with all who are engaged in the struggle. Amen, and blessed be. Come forward, sharing your joy, your concern with this gathered community as we light these silent candles gathered within these blessed walls of our sanctuary.
Oh
Our reading this morning is from Useful Delusions, The Power and Paradox of the Self-Deceiving Brain by Shankar Vedantam and Bill Messler. Believing what we want to believe and seeing what we want to see is less a state of mind or a reflection of one's intelligence and more a response to one's circumstances. Foregoing self-deception isn't merely a mark of education or enlightenment, it's a sign of privilege. If you don't believe in Santa Claus or the virgin birth, it's because your life does not depend on your believing such things. Your material, cultural, and social worlds are providing you with other safety nets for your psychological and physical needs. But should your circumstances change for the worse, were the pillars of your life to buckle and sway, your mind too would prove fertile ground for the wildest self-deceptions. There are, as we say, no atheists in foxholes.
I want to begin by thanking Trevor for playing Bint Canaan by Carole King, a song that is full of memory and the blurriness of time, which is part of what we're thinking about today, the ways that our memory sometimes plays tricks on us. Thank you. My father-in-law, Dick Soul, was a colorful character who had many funny sayings in his lexicon. Wake up, they're moving the outhouse. Drive fast, the roads are covered with drunks. And sometimes, when I was trying to have a discussion or a debate with him about some important element, he would erupt with, "Don't bother me with the facts, I've made up my mind." That was usually followed by him slamming his fist down, and that was the end of the discussion. Perhaps you have also run into that kind of brick wall, human or otherwise, as you tried to present someone with reason, intellect, data during an emotional discussion. And you found out that, nope, they were just not interested in going to that place. Another story comes to mind. When I was growing up, my father, a social worker and a very smart guy, tended to say yes to me more than no. A good idea, he felt, if I could provide logic and reason for why I wanted to do something. If I made my case well enough, I got the green light. If I wanted to do something just because, like, because all the other kids are, well, there might be a yellow or a red light in that case. I tried to pass this mode of reasoning on to my own kids, and in general, I think that there should be a sensibility about what we want to do or not do something. We want to do it because it's good for all of us, for instance, or because others will benefit from the decision rather than just because I want to, or because all the cool kids are doing it. But sometimes, too often these days, we get swept up in a tide of misinformation that can take us into a world of believing or advocating for something that really isn't true, something that is built on a house of cards, something or someone that can be destructive or that might not help us in the end. Cults of personality have always been around. Some might suggest that Jesus had one surrounding him, as have other charismatic leaders or people who have managed to garner a certain amount of notoriety for what they have said or done. Sometimes that makes total sense. In this area, in April, we like to celebrate patriots. So let me just acknowledge that historical figures like George Washington, who was respected for his leadership, or John Adams, who was, by all accounts, a brilliant but pretty prickly character, were admired for their commitment to what they saw as values that would sustain the nascent American society. Today, you can undoubtedly think of some others who might go into this bucket of inspiring, charismatic leaders who have garnered followers to advance their perspectives. Malala Yousafzai, Greta Thunberg, Reverend William Barber, and of course, Volodymyr Zelensky, the remarkable president of Ukraine, come to mind in today's society. What about people who attract attention and soon a cult of personality develops around them with negative consequence? There are examples ranging from the most recent past occupant of the White House to Jim Jones, he of the People's Temple and the Jonestown Massacre, or perhaps Benito Mussolini, who founded Italy's National Fascist Party in the 1930s and 40s. Despite the reality of evidence that was available about the damage that could be experienced from following the words and path laid out by such folk, people were willing to support the direction that was articulated. In the case of at least some, with catastrophic results. Now, it is surely true that at least some of us search for transformative and even charismatic leadership in our time. We look for a person who can turn things around, lay out a new direction that will be better than the one we are headed in now, or give us some hope for a better future. You probably can also think of other applications of this story. I mentioned the recent past occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There's also the radio talk show host Alex Jones, who publicly said over and over again that the Sandy Hook school massacre wasn't real. The very popular host of a cable news show who cranks out stuff about Hunter Biden and conspiracies on a regular basis. And of course, the kicker is people believe this stuff. These are cautionary tales, and they illustrate what can happen when those who are asked to lead come up against the realities of a situation, or perhaps facts and data that begin to show us another picture of what is really going on. As Shankar Vedantam says in his book, Useful Delusions, if the forces of logic and rationality often seem ineffective at fighting superstition, delusion, and conspiracy theories, it's because the new city of Rome speaks a different language than the old city of Rome. The two cities have different value systems. They have different ways of knowing. When the rational brain claims to have all the answers, it often ends up being misunderstood, undermined, or ignored. Co-create a world that produces the best in human beings, Vedantam argues, for we must certainly be informed by reason, rationality, and science, but we must also deploy the insights of logic using aspects of our mind that are prone to storytelling, symbols, and self-deception. People tend to rely on myth, allegory, and story to help us make sense of what we don't understand. And we hold on to those stories and make them into truths about what should be, about what is true. But shouldn't we try and understand why we believe certain stories, particular myths, and also in believing what it gets us? We are, Vedantam says, not just in a war with con artists, conspiracy theorists, and demagogues. We are in a war with ourselves. Our minds are not designed to see the truth, but to show us selective slices of reality and to prompt us toward predetermined goals. So, when we talk about a big lie, for instance, the idea that the Holocaust did not really happen, or Donald Trump's claim of a stolen election, or heaven save us, the idea that vaccines implant microchips in us for tracking by others, we are calling out the illusions that people have held, despite data, statistics, and evidence to the contrary, that what seems true is not so. Sometimes this occurs because of isolation from direct access to evidence, and sometimes because the position we hold helps us make sense of what we cannot otherwise explain. My beloved spouse calls this willful ignorance, a way in which, despite everything we know or observe, we hold on to some other truth that will advance a position that fits better with how we see the world. When I was studying American drama, one of the plays I found powerful was Arthur Miller's 1953 allegory, The Crucible. I imagine that a number of you know it. The play about the Salem witch trials that occurred in 1692 and 1693. The settlers in Salem and surrounding communities had been living as God-fearing people in isolated settings. Mass hysteria took hold as people, many of them women, were accused of speaking in tongues, causing phenomena to occur, or not following accepted religious practice. Dozens died, and this piece of history has become an emblematic illustration of the dangers of religious extremism, false accusations, and lack of due process. Miller wrote the play, however, as a parable about the mass hysteria which was rampant in the United States in the 1940s and 50s. During that time, the United States was obsessed with the evils of communism and set out through its House Committee on Un-American Activities and later through the campaigns of U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin to name and purge all who supported socialism or communism. It was a dark time in U.S. history and culture as the other was rooted out, and one which has been echoed in recent years through the relentless pursuit of immigrants to this country who were sought out by ICE and deported. What does our own brain tell us about what we know and what is true? And how do those elements shape how we as individuals behave in communities like religious ones, like this one maybe? For example, my view is that one of the central conundrums currently facing Unitarian Universalism is the challenge between who and what we say we are and how we behave and understand ourselves. We say that we are an association of congregations drawn together through our churches. Our governance has delegates who vote as representatives of their member congregations on policies and statements made on behalf of our faith community. That happens annually at our General Assembly. We exist in these congregations, many of whom recite a unison affirmation or a profession of faith, which in some traditions is called a covenant. And in a lot of churches, there is also a behavioral covenant, a statement developed by and with the community that articulates how we will be with one another and how we will behave for the benefit of all in the community. And yet, we almost always seem to behave as individuals who happen to exist within the container of a congregation. We are members here, but our view is focused on what I as an individual want, not on what will be in the best interest of the congregation as a whole. Years ago, the Reverend Sue Phillips, who formerly served the New England region of the UUA as its lead minister, told the members of a congregation, "Shocking as it may seem, the minister is not here to make you happy. They are here to serve the congregation." I remember that there were audible gasps in the room after she said that. It was a true shock for people who were focused on what I want and what will make me happy, or at least happier. And this paradox is another way in which we want to believe, and what we expect can turn into a rationale for what we then imagine to be true. So, of course, the minister or the religious educator or the music director or the congregational administrator should do this thing that I want, because deep inside they are here to make me happy. And because I need it, I believe that everyone else needs it in just the same way too. So please do it now, and we'll all be good. Now, that is a rationale for action that is invented, as we have done with stories since language began on the earth. Things are created to explain what we want to know or understand. We develop a logic for the story, and we share it with others, and often it takes hold. Others believe the same thing or decide that it's a really good idea. And for sure, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's only good for one person or for a clear minority. So there is this question about what is it that we can hold together to build the common good, the community, and strengthen that community. So what are we to do when we are faced with the ultimate unanswerable questions, the ones about how to understand death and whether immortality or resurrection exists? This struggle, which philosopher Stephen Cave calls the mortality paradox, lays out the reality that we will one day die, yet we humans cannot really imagine being dead. And on the other side, Cave suggests, are the immortality narratives. First, the belief that through the fountains of youth, elixirs, or special powers, we can extend life. Adam in Genesis lived to the very ripe age of 930 years. Others have been able to choose their own death or make life continue. The power of myth. Or there is the immortality that comes from other religions, that of resurrection. Here, we live on or live again. We're in Lent and quickly approaching Easter. The resurrection of Jesus is central to Christian faiths and others. Jewish and Muslim, for instance, tell stories of a future day when true believers will be resurrected in an afterlife. Think of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, who gets a do-over. Sleeping Beauty, who goes to sleep for a very long time and then awakens. The Egyptians of ancient times, who believed that the pharaohs, like Ramesses II, would reign in the afterlife. Whether you hold these beliefs or choose to follow statistics and science and assert that life is for the here and now, we seek narratives that will help to answer the unknown. That is, at its core, what much of religion is here for, I think, to help us struggle with the questions of the world and of our lives that we just don't understand. But this question remains: what can we explain, or what do we embrace through data, rational processes, and observation? And what do we decide to explain away through wish, hope, and prayer? Each of us will have our own answers to those queries. Knowing and unknowing can be both a blessing and a curse. Whether your eyes remain wide open or you choose to blink, may the answers that you most need become clear for you.
This congregation exists and thrives through the gifts of those who call this place their spiritual home. As we continue to focus on the ways in which we can all combat climate change, we invite you to support the life and ministry of this congregation and the Massachusetts Climate Action Network. You may make a gift online or send your check. Please give as generously as you are willing and able. If this is your first time with us, please, your presence is a gift in itself. Thank you.
Melissa Martin, your Member Services and Volunteer Coordinator. My pronouns are she and her. This week, our Strategic Planning Committee and our Committee on Ministry wrap up their final conversation circles. Please register for your last chance to participate either this afternoon at 4 p.m. or Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. We hope that you will. Our Winter Frolic team wants you to know that there's still room for today's guided hike to the Middlesex Fells Reservation. Friends of all ages are welcome on this guided hike, and you should meet here in the church parking lot at 1 o'clock to carpool over. They'd also like you to know that there are tickets still available for the Roald Wilson concert here on Saturday, May 7th at 7 p.m. You can check the newsletter for ticket information. For today, our governing board really hopes that you'll stay for our search update meeting immediately after this service. There, the board will explain some of the things they've learned in conversation with the UUA about obtaining a new minister, and they want your input on the path that will be chosen. Those joining us online should log into your Zoom social hour link to participate in the meeting. Those who are here with us in the sanctuary, just a reminder that we won't be using this atrium entrance door as our guests are still in their workshop this afternoon. There will be a brief 10-minute intermission at the end of service before we start the meeting. And please join us in the narthex entrance where you can grab a refreshment of strawberry lemonade or water before the meeting. Or you can use the Austin transept doors for one of the restrooms at the top or the bottom of the stairs. And if you need any assistance, please see me or one of the ushers. We thank you, and we invite you to become a vital part of our congregational life.
So we'll close our service with singing. I do want to remind you, if you haven't seen our announcement, the community chorus that I direct and that Trevor accompanies and that several UUCR members have been a part of, currently Ron Cavicchio, Barbara Bennett, and Barbara Dwyer-Heidkamp. We are giving our first live concert in 2 years on April 9th in Arlington. So if you want to come and hear some really grateful singers sing some really good music, please see me or just come. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing this beautiful hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Please join us in the chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts.
Friends, life is short, and we have little time to gladden the hearts of those who travel with us. So I pray you be swift to love and hasten to be kind. Go in peace. Go in love.